Chapter 10, Bhagavan's Vibhooti Yoga. That is the chapter we are seeing. The principle in this chapter is actually a really nice one, and it covers questions that we often face. It answers questions we have without us even knowing that it's answering those questions. So here's the principle. Bhagavan is all-pervasive, but we can't see him everywhere. Correct? That is our current state. We know theoretically that Bhagavan is all-pervasive, but we can't see him. Then another question comes, well, if Bhagavan is everything, is he bad things also? And that is such a disturbing thought for a lot of people, And they have this thought that, well, if that's the kind of Lord we have, then I don't want to love such a Lord. If this Lord is like this, I don't want to love him. So, yes, it is true that Bhagavan is everything. It is also true that we cannot see the all-pervasive nature of the Lord right now. And it is also true that we cannot see the compassion in the things that we are currently calling bad. Correct? Then we have to say one additional thing, that it is also true that we want to come to see the Lord's all-pervasiveness more than we want to argue about the fact that it is not worth loving such a Lord who looks like he gives us bad things and gives bad things in the world and all of that. Okay? So if this is our current state, then this is the chapter for us. When your mind is like this, enter Vibhooti Yoga, right? Vibhooti Yoga is the thing is a wrong word. It's the sadhana, it's the vision, it's the view that helps us to transition from where we are right now to where we want to be. Meaning it helps us to go from seeing the world to seeing the Lord's all-pervasive presence. And the way it does that is actually something that we are very familiar with in the way we learn in the world. When we were learning math as a child, and the teacher would bring all kinds of things into the classroom. She would say, okay, look, these are apples. This is one apple. This is a second apple. Now, if I have two apples here, and I have two more apples on this side, how many apples do I have? Then the child will count 1, 2, 3, 4. The child will say 4. So 2 plus 2 equals 4 by counting apples. Then the teacher says, okay, now I have 2 oranges, or I give you 2 oranges, and then I give you 2 more oranges. Now, how many oranges do you have? And the child says 5. The teacher says, how did you get 5? That doesn't make sense. If I give you 2 apples and 2 apples, that makes 4. How is 2 oranges and 2 oranges making 5? The child said, because I have 1 orange already. When we are learning to count, we need these tangible things. Then we transition to the abacus. Correct? You move those little beads and all. Then we count on our fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then slowly we transition to mental math. Unless we have a calculator. I had a coworker, like a long time ago, and I couldn't forget this because we were trying to add some things and we had to do 6 times 10. And he was like, hold on, let me get my calculator. And I said, what? 6 times 10, you need a calculator? But the point is, we go from gross to subtle, right? And we use alambanas or supports to get there. Guruji explains how that's the same with reading. We start with one letter at a time, and then we learn to associate sounds with pictures. Then we move to single words with pictures. Then we move to 2 words. Then we move to 1 sentence with a picture. And then when you're a child, you pretend you're reading, but actually you're just guessing based on what the picture is. So, and then eventually we can read all kinds of things with deep meanings and no pictures. So there's a process. Vibhuti Yoga is like that stepping stone that helps us to transform our vision as well. Okay? And the main principle in Vibhuti Yoga is that it is true that the Lord is everything, Everything exists. Everything is Sat. Everything is knowable. Everything is Chit. And everything has the capacity to give joy in some form. Everything is Ananda. But we cannot see him like this. We don't see the world like this. And it is also true that there are some things in the world right now that disturb our mind. And there are some things that bring peace and purity to our mind when we think about them. Correct or wrong? There are things that are in the world that when we think about, we get great joy and peace and contentment. And then there are other things that bring a lot of agitation to our mind. So the Vibhootis of the Lord are presented in such a way that we reflect on those things that will help purify our mind and uplift our vision. The example Guruji gives in the course is Vishvamohini. That is a Bhagavan's Maya only, right? That is not supposed to be meditated or contemplated upon, because that form of the Lord, that avatar, that manifestation, whatever you want to call it, was for a different purpose. So that is not going to help to purify our mind. In fact, with Vishwa Mohini, Naraji got deluded. Then with Mohini avatar in the, the churning of the ocean, so many devatas got deluded and everything. So reflecting on that is not going to help purify our mind, and it's not going to help us to come to see the all-pervasiveness of the Lord. When we talk about Bhagavan, he is all the Daityas, all the Rakshasas also. But when we reflect on them, we don't choose, Bhagavan didn't choose Hiranyakashipu with all his negative qualities, or Ravana or Kamsa. He chose Prahlad. He says, among all the Daityas, I am Prahlad. Because by meditating on Prahlad, our mind is able to develop certain qualities that help us to purify it, to come to see the all-pervasiveness of the Lord. And we need all the help we can get, because it is very difficult to comprehend the reality behind this universe. So we choose what helps. Everything is the Lord. We can't see it. So we bring our attention to glories in the world that will help to uplift and purify our mind in such a way that we come to slowly see the all-pervasiveness of that. This is the principle in Vibhooti Yoga. Now, the bhava with which we approach this topic is also highlighted in the chapter. The bhava is that we should know that all the things being told here means Bhagavan's vibhuti is being highlighted. We won't find it anywhere else. Nowhere else can anyone help us to divinize our vision. Only the Lord can teach us how to divinize our vision. And the reason is simple. The Lord is the essence, the Lord is the substratum, the Lord is the cause. Everyone and everything else is effect only. So the effect can never know the cause, let alone teach you about the cause. So it is very clear in our tradition that the Lord himself comes as our guru in some form and teaches us this knowledge that will divinize our life. So in this course, Guruji as Bhagavan is clarifying the vibhutis that Bhagavan has pointed out for us. For Arjuna, just telling the statements was enough. But we are not Arjuna. We need the extra explanation. We need the extra understanding, right? Pandavanam Dhananjaya. Bhagavan says, among all the Pandavas, I'm Dhananjaya. He didn't say our name anywhere in the Vibhutis. So we need that extra help. So Bhagavan himself comes to help us as our Guru. So we shouldn't forget that it is the Lord himself who is revealing his Vibhutis to us. In that sentiment, the power of the words becomes much greater. And then when we come to know the Lord, we should remember that it is only his grace, meaning he reveals his nature, and we know not objectively, but by becoming one with him. Right now, especially when we're trying to see the Lord's all-pervasiveness, we're trying to objectively know the Lord. But you should also know that there is never a possibility of knowing the Lord objectively. True knowing of the Lord is only subjective. So that is the bhava that we have as we approach this chapter. Now, Bhagavan makes it very clear in this chapter that he is everything. He says it multiple times in this chapter, right? And when we think of everything, we usually think of things outside. We usually think of the external phenomena. But Bhagavan also takes time to point out very early in the chapter that he is also our inner world as our substrate, meaning he is the intellect because of which we understand. He is the knowledge which we gather from that intellect. He is the removal of delusion that happens as a result of that knowledge. He is forgiveness that brings peace to our life. He himself is truthfulness that brings power to our words. He is mastery over our senses and our mind, which brings control to our life. He's the joy that we look for. He's the sorrow which we experience and try to evade. He is fear. He is fearlessness. He is equanimity and contentment and dana and fame and everything. He is everything. That is what he's saying. So he is all these things in my life and in other people's lives. And the beautiful thing is that we don't need to look outside to find the Lord. Actually, the Lord is everywhere, but the place we will end up finding him in is in our own heart at the end of the day. Okay? Now a question comes, okay, so you're saying I should reflect on the glories of the Lord, special manifestations of the Lord, so that my mind gets purified and I come to see the Lord like this. But why should I know the Lord like this in the first place? Well, what is the purpose? He tells that also in this chapter. Because knowing the Lord like this gives us the goal we are looking for in every pursuit. We want to be unshaken in the face of challenges. You know, I'm sure you've all gone into a meeting and gotten frustrated and said things and come out and been like, I wish I didn't lose my cool. I wish I was calm. I wish I was able to handle it better, you know? So we want to be unshaken in the face of challenges. We want to have clarity. We don't want to have doubts. And we want to be free from sorrow. But all sorrow comes from Papa. So Bhagavan tells Arjuna very clearly that the one who knows my essence and my yoga, meaning my power, and my vibhooti, my glories, that person becomes established in avikampa yoga, in unshakable yoga. There's nothing that can shake that person. Their delusion gets removed, their papa gets removed. So it is in our best interest to develop this vision. Now he gives countless vibhootis in this chapter, 80 something-ish, right? But the main principle behind all of those vibhootis is that the Lord is the source or the origin of this whole creation. And because of the Lord, everything functions. And when we develop this awareness of divine consciousness, at that time, everything that we do becomes worship of the Lord because we see the Lord everywhere. Tulsidashi tells in the beginning of Ramayana, Siya Rama Maya Saba Jagajani. I see Sri Rama and Sita Ji everywhere. Therefore, or the natural effect of that is, Karahu Pranama Jodi Juga Bani. I fold my hands and I do pranams to this entire universe because of that. He does pranams to Rakshasas. And he says things like, I am doing pranams to them because they are going to meet their death at Sri Rama's arrows. You know, who sees the world like that? He's able to tell good things about bad people also. He's able to see that. And this is the difference between someone who has this vision and us, that they see that all power and all glory that is observed in the world belongs to the Lord. Okay? We think that it is our power or other people's power and glory. And then that comes with ego. That brings anxiety of not wanting to lose, of wanting to, all kinds of things will come. And so in forgetting the Lord's power or misattributing it, there is great anxiety in our life. In Narada Bhakti Sutra, Naraji says, Tad vismarane, in forgetting the Lord, parama vyakulata. There's extreme anxiety. Anxiety comes when we cannot see the reality. Okay, now before Bhagavan starts to list out his vibhutis one by one, he tells something that actually resolves a big dilemma people have about Bhakti Marga versus Jnana Marga. If you don't pay attention, you might miss it, but see this. We learn that the only thing that can remove our ignorance is knowledge. Correct? This is what we've learned in Vedanta. The only thing that can remove our ignorance and our sorrow is knowledge. Self-knowledge is the only solution to our problems. The only solution. Then how is it that bhaktas who don't study Vedanta get mukti? So bhakti is not enough? That is the question that people also have. And you guys have that question? If you don't have that question, we'll skip it and move on. Many people have that question, right? And in this most profound pair of verses, Bhagavan explains that for someone who is always in remembrance of the Lord, who always has love for the Lord, he says, Dadami buddhi yogam tam. I give them knowledge. Yena mam upayanti te, by which they come to me. Right? So you have love for the Lord, he will make sure you get that. How you get it, that is up to him. Right? And if you notice, I don't know how many of you have studied the works of great bhaktas or listened to their poetry, but you actually see a difference in certain poems being very form descriptive, and you'll see some being extremely descriptive of the formless, all-pervasive reality, and no vague words. So you see, the love that they have allows them to reach an understanding of the Lord as he really is. Bhagavan himself gives that understanding. He goes on to say that out of compassion, seated in their antakarana, I destroy the darkness born of ignorance with the shining lamp of knowledge. This is Bhagavan's statement. That means that when any knowledge dawns, we have to remember that the Lord has lit the light of knowledge. This is his vibhuti, right? That Bhagavan himself removes our knowledge when we bring him into our heart. Now, if you reflect a little on these verses, when Bhagavan says, Dadami buddhi yogam tam, I give them buddhi yoga, buddhi yoga doesn't only mean knowledge, right? Buddhi yoga also means karma yoga. It also means bhakti yoga. I'll show you how. In karma yoga, we need the right attitude to even do karma yoga, right? Like we need arpana buddhi, the sentiment that I'm doing it for the Lord or for the universe or whatever. And we need prasada buddhi, that whatever is coming is for my benefit. We need to always remember the Lord in bhakti yoga. So we need the right mind that allows us to do it. So when Bhagavan says he gives us buddhi yoga, he means he gives us whatever we need at every point in our journey. And he does it out of compassion. Anukampartham, he says, out of compassion he gives. That means, when we hear this thing, that we think that, the Lord will only give us things we like. Correct? When we think about the Lord giving us things, we think he will only give us things we like. But you see, it does not mean only good things, right? If we have developed ahankara, he will give us a situation to remove it most quickly. The more dear we are to him, the more quickly he will try to remove it. Naraji in Ramayana is prime example of that. If we don't have awareness, he will get us in trouble to realize its importance. We read so many stories and hear stories about people who spend time with Gurudev. And they would say how one yell from him removed lifetimes of durganas from their heart. Right? One yell from your guru, one look of intensity burns away like lifetimes of papa. Right? Now, if you had a choice between Gurudev being soft and kind and not saying anything to you, right? Versus yelling at you and lifetimes of negativity getting removed. And you would feel like, you would just want the ground to open and you want to disappear at that time, the way he screams. Which would you rather choose? Would you rather the option where he says nothing and gives you love like that and you stay as you are? Or the option where you feel in the moment like everything is like the worst thing ever, but moments later you realize that you're saved from lifetimes of removing this durga? Which would you choose? Which is the more compassionate option? You see, in consideration of our long-term evolution, actually the thing that seems uncompassionate is the more compassionate one. So how the Lord expresses his compassion is not for us to judge at all. Okay. When someone gives a little thought to the implications of what Bhagavan has said so far in this chapter, it moves the heart in such a way that, it moves the heart so much that Arjuna, his style of questioning also changed in this chapter. He was so moved that when he asked Bhagavan questions mid-chapter, it wasn't like his usual questions. This time, his questions are filled with so much bhava. And in the style of questions, you can feel his reverence, you can feel his love. And he actually forgets that he's on the battlefield. And he tells Bhagavan, look, Bhagavan, only you know yourself by yourself. Okay, you're the only one who knows yourself. And I want to know you. So since only you can describe your vibhutis, I want you to tell me in detail about your vibhutis. This thing that you've told me so far in chapter 7, a few examples, chapter 9, a few examples, now you're telling me you're everything, that is not enough. I want you to describe for me your vibhutis. Okay. So Bhagavan says, out of seeing Arjuna's love, Bhagavan helplessly says, as though, okay, I will tell you, but he also says, there's no end to my vibhutis. So I will tell you the prominent ones. But he gives the greatest vibhuti first. What is the greatest vibhuti of the Lord in your opinion? I am the greatest vibhuti. Some people will say. The greatest vibhuti of the Lord is that he says, I am the Atma, I am the self, seated in the inner heart of all beings. Meaning, the greatest vibhuti of the Lord is that he is the self of all beings. Any existence, any life that we see, and any special features of any beings is all because of the Lord. Everything comes from, exists in, and merges in the Lord. This is his greatest vibhuti. Now, when we see something beautiful, Guruji gives the example of a flower. You can also take the example of a sunset or a full moon. Oh wow, that moon is so beautiful. Oh wow, that sunset is so beautiful. Right? We attribute the specialty of that thing to the thing itself. But, and if we see the beauty, the power, the specialty of that thing as belonging to it itself, Guruji describes, then that is a worldly vision. If we see the same thing now as the Lord's beauty, then that is Vibhuti Darshan. So we can have Laukika Darshan, a worldly vision, or we can have Vibhuti Darshan, seeing the glory of the Lord wherever we live. This is the option that we have. We see greatness right now already. Our mind is naturally drawn to great things in this world. If we can take those great things and see the divinity in them, then we are able to see the divinity slowly in more and more of this universe. Now, if we can't see the divinity in the whole world. So we have to start by finding it in those great things. You know, if you see a dust particle, do you go, oh, wow? Do you say that? You say, well, maybe it depends. Oh, wow. I just cleaned here. How did it come back? Maybe you say it in that context, but you don't say, oh, wow, look at Bhagawan's Vibhooti in this dust particle, right? Now, you go and see a mountain. What is a mountain except for infinite dust particles put together? Somehow, all of those dust particles, now when they're put together, we look at them and we say, oh, wow. So we're able to evoke a different feeling in our heart when we see the grandeur of that same dust particle in some slightly different form. Right? It is the same thing with drops of water. A drop of water, you look at it and you don't say, but people travel from across the world to come to Niagara Falls to say, oh, wow. It is the exact same drops of water, but the form of that water brings out a different feeling from our heart. So the Vibhootis of the Lord are there to help us to bring out that, oh, wow, feeling and send that thought in the direction of the Lord. Okay? So he lists so many vibhutis that we're supposed to go on reflecting about. Right? Why? Because doing chintanam or reflecting on them, these qualities will come in us. We develop those qualities. And the mind gets more purified, more subtle, more expansive. And then we're also supposed to see what makes these things prominent and bring those things in our life. That is how we're supposed to reflect on these vibhutis. And I tell you, nowhere else will you find the vibhutis so phenomenally categorized as Guruji has categorized them in this CIF Bhagavad Gita course. There's the category of nature, of the Vedas and the Puranas, the category of Bhagavan's incarnations, the category of devotees and sages, and finally, glories experienced by human beings. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the chapter, these glories are just scattered. Different glory, different place, no systematic presentation, at least as it appears to us, right? But Guruji takes them, categorizes them, and highlights key wonderful vibhutis for our reflection. So take your favorite ones and think about them. These are not exhaustive by any means. They're only a selection. Even the ones in the Gita are only a selection, because after Bhagavan finishes 80-something vibhutis, he says, right then, I have told you just a few. He tells Arjuna right there, don't think this is the end of my vibhuti, right? You can go on thinking about vibhutis of the Lord. Just a few days ago on New Year's Day, Dave and I were reflecting about how New Year's Day is an ordinary day, actually speaking. You know, if you go to sleep and you don't check your watch, or you're not awake at that time and you don't watch the ball drop and all of that, right? Will you know when it becomes 12 o'clock, when it becomes New Year's Day, right? I saw a really funny thing that some parents moved their clock forward to pretend that it was 12 o'clock, celebrated New Year's, and sent their kids to sleep at 9 p.m. But there is something about New Year's Day in today's generation that it does something to everybody, no matter what tradition they're from. Okay? It allows everyone to find some new inspiration. True or false? Huh. So maybe Bhagavan would say, we were thinking, among days, I am New Year's Day. Because there's some glory in that day, even though it's a normal day, right? Like that, you can go on making up vibhutis in your life also. Please don't go and tell anyone. Bhagavan says in Gita that I am New Year's Day among days. That is Dev and me supposing and superimposing. Okay. But like that, you can see glories in everything. Among technology, I am blank. In the smartphone, I am blank. Among games, I am dash. Among my friends, I am. Don't answer that. Right? If you like shopping, among malls, I am dash. Whatever you want, wherever you want, you try to see the vibhutis of the Lord. And in all of those things, you ask yourself, what is it that makes this thing so glorious, so special, so lovable? That thing because of which we love it, that thing is the Lord. So our mind has to now start saying, oh, I actually love the Lord. And if you don't like the word Lord, that's okay. I actually love the self, right? So I love this thing. I see greatness in this thing. That thing is the Lord. Not just it belongs to the Lord, it is the Lord. So what I love, what I admire, what I revere, what I seek is actually the Lord or the self. I just can't see it, right? So we reflect like this. The chapter on Vibhuti Yoga is about seeing one thing in all things, seeing the Lord in all. And in the next chapter, chapter 11, we will switch our vision from trying to see one in all to seeing all in one. So that is the opposite vision now that Bhagavan will present, but it requires Vibhuti Yoga first before you can see Vishwarupa Darshan. So this is what will be coming up when we start chapter 11. Okay, pause here and I will switch to the questions. Our morning discussion group had various questions. How to absorb this Vibhuti Darshana and make it real. This seemed to us to be the biggest learning from this lesson. Okay. What you do is you take the Vibhutis that are presented in this lesson and you meditate on them. There is no shortcut to meditating or reflecting on the Vibhutis. But there's a shortcut to start, right? And that is that you choose one that is easy for you or one that you like. And then you work your way to more difficult ones, right? When you do that, like Guruji has said, and like I shared also right now, the qualities come into your mind. Your mind becomes subtler and more expansive, and slowly you come to see that everything is Satchitanand. Right? Then you try to see what it is that makes that thing prominent and try to bring that in your life. Like Bhagavan says, among animals, I am the lion. What is it about the lion? We don't have to become a lion, but the thing that makes a lion glorious is you can think, oh, the lion is fearless. You know, let me bring fearlessness into my life. Like that, we reflect. Then, every time that our mind sees any glory, first our mind will say, oh, that thing is glorious. You know, the next thought should be, that glory is the Lord. It's okay if it is the second thought and not the first, but it should be at least one of the thoughts, maybe not second, maybe like 50th, but it should enter our list of thoughts when we see glorious things, right? And this should be for glories inside and glories outside. You know, when a child says, this thing is mine, that child feels like something is theirs, mine, 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 right? The parents have to teach, no, we share. No, it is not yours, it is everybody's. You know, slowly they keep repeating until the child understands. Then the child also has to repeat. No, we share. They have to tell themselves and walk themselves through sharing, right? In the same way, we see the sunset or we see the moon and we say, oh, the moon is so beautiful. And we have to say, no, the moon's beauty is the Lord's beauty. We have to walk ourselves through it also and keep reminding ourselves like that. That is one of the ways that we can try to make it real in our life, right? The Lord's Vibhoothi's description is like a buffet table, yeah. How do I download smaller portions of it and apply it to daily life to make living better? How do you go about eating food on a buffet table? With joy. Everyone smiled when I asked that question. You take, first of all, you take however much can fit on your plate. That also is a subjective thing. You know how much can fit on a person's plate? Depends on if the buffet is like you can go countless times or if you can only go one time. I've seen people at salad bars where they're allowed to go once. They like use the salad leaves to make their plate bigger. And then they layer it like a mountain and all kinds of things, right? But you take how much can fit on your plate as you understand how much can fit. Then also, you don't take everything. The buffet has countless things. You take the ones you like or the ones you think you ought to take or whatever, right? Usually at buffets, we choose what we like first. When we finish, then we go back for more. It is the same thing here. Take the ones that you like. Take the ones that can fit in your mind, meaning in your current worldview. Then you reflect, reflect, reflect. When you feel ready, then you take on a few more. And then your mind will slowly become more and more subtle, and it will spontaneously be able to start thinking of those ones too. Right? And unlike a buffet table, don't worry. You will not become full and wish you could take more, but you don't have space, right? You will not be forbidden from going back because you've gone too many times. No one will judge you for that. In fact, Bhagavan, Arjuna himself describes Bhagavan's words as um, insatiable. He says that I have no tripti yet. I have no contentment listening to what you're saying. I want you to go on and on talking because your words are like amrita. So we will never get tired of listening and reflecting. Bhagavan's glories will never end. And when we're done with the ones in the course, Gita has more. When we're done with the ones in Gita, our mind will make up more. And if you feel like there are too many, also don't worry. Our Swami Prakashanandaji tells over and over again, you are not going anywhere. The knowledge is not going anywhere. The world is not going anywhere. Guru is not going anywhere. You take your time and you reflect on them joyfully, right? And reflecting on a few also is enough if we do it properly, right? So this is one way to think about that question. Okay. Though you had guided us in our earlier satsang on lesson 16, still Bhakti Yoga part of learning seems not quite real to apply into daily living, especially the part of accepting all the good, the bad, and the ugly in equal light, Samatva Buddhi. Your tips to help us in this journey to appreciate and see everything as Bhagavan's Vibhooti will be really helpful. Okay. So I had shared in class how Vibhuti Yoga is the stepping stone to seeing the world like that, right? Like that example of counting apples to eventually mental math. Now see our state. We have been using a calculator to do big calculations for so long. And now suddenly we want to do mental math. Can you go directly and say, well, I was doing like 6-figure multiplication on my calculator, so I should be able to do that in mental math. I don't want to start with learning 2 times table and 3 times table and memorizing them. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you haven't developed the capacity to do it with small numbers, you have to start there. Right? Okay, that's a bit hard to imagine because we've all grown up in an era of forced mental math, right? You imagine that children didn't learn to write anymore. ABCD writing, only typing, right? Now in their 30s or their 40s, something happens and computers are gone and they have to learn to write. Does it matter that they're in their 30s and their 40s? So they can just like pick up a pen and start to write because they ought to be able to write at that age? No. if they didn't do the preliminary steps, it doesn't matter how old they are. Those steps are what is going to help them gain the capacity to write, right? So in the same way, we cannot see the world like that right now. So we're not going to be able to see it like that overnight. We have to start with the preliminary steps of seeing the Lord's presence in the wonderful things in this world first. Then slowly we can come to see it in the not so wonderful things also. And it will come. You know, we are very lucky. Our Hindu worldview helps us in this regard, right? We may not see it, but we look at the world differently. Like when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is you look at your hands. You're looking and saying, there's divinity in my karma shakti, you know? Then you get off the bed and you touch the ground and you say, oh, Mother Earth, I'm sorry for putting my feet on you. You understand that there's divinity in the earth, right? We understand that there's divinity in rivers. So we already have a platform from which we're going to start evolving because in our worldview, there's an understanding of an all-pervasive divinity. We may not just have thought about it deep, right? Now, Guruji highlights, I remember here, that even when reflecting on glories in negative things, we have to choose wisely. Like Bhagavan chooses Prahlad, I said, among the Danavas, right? Guruji highlights that as an example too. Not the most powerful bad guy. So you choose something that even within the negative will help lift your mind. Right? He says he's gambling among deceitful things. Not so we go and start gambling, or we start to think gambling is good because the Lord is gambling, But we have to see the point is that the fascination that is there for gambling, that fascination is the Lord, right? And that fascination is what we're supposed to admire. So even in negative things, we have to see some positive glory that we can reflect. And when someone bad is there, at minimum, they have one Vibhooti that we can all see, and that is that they have life. Guruji describes it as the most precious life. That is one Vibhooti of the Lord. So at minimum, we can remember, no, they have some Vibhooti of the Lord also. You can see Vibhooti of the Lord there too. Right? Usually when we talk about seeing Bhagavan in bad things, it's in context of the effects it's having on our mind that we're calling it bad, right? But remember also that Bhagavan gives us what we need out of compassion, correct? Like Gurudev's chiding. So this thing that I'm calling bad, it is happening for my good. That is a vibhuti actually, for us to think that something which is good for us is bad for us, right? This, how is it that the child does not see that their mom loves them when the child is forced to eat vegetables and denied dessert? That is a great vibhuti of the Lord, actually, that children are born with a repulsion for healthy food and, and they think their mom doesn't like them, but actually it's the exact opposite. Vibhuti or not, look at the glory of the Lord in the way this thing is looked at. Now, even with similarly with cosmic catastrophic events, right? How is it that the Lord is able to give everyone the karma phala that they deserve, including me for feeling the effects of it? And he is doing it for everyone's benefit. That is a vibhuti actually, that what is happening may appear bad, but it is actually for our benefit, right? So vibhuti yoga is supposed to be the stepping stone to help us with this, right? The more we reflect on it, the hope is that the more it helps us. Okay. If you all have any follow-up questions, then you please ask. I'll just finish these and then you can ask, right? Okay, reflection question 5, 6, 7, 8 asked us to go through our daily life and try to see the Lord peeping behind all that we see and encounter as Bhagawan playing hide and seek with us as his ultimate sport. When we tried doing it for a day and discussed it the next day, it felt nice, a sense of peace, a sense of not seeing the problems, etc. But none of us could apply this thought of reflection for more than a couple minutes during the day, and we felt we totally forgot about this reflection later in our day's chores. How can we start applying this reflection for much longer portions of our day, such that our work and all the challenges we face become just his play, and we can breeze through our endless chores with a continuous sense of joy and smile? You want to know the answer? Are you ready for the answer? The answer is practice. You know, when we are learning to walk, it takes so much effort for us to walk. In fact, that is the only thing we can focus on. So we take time out of life to practice getting up, keeping our balance, falling, getting up again, taking 2 steps, falling, getting up again. But the children find joy and excitement in that or not. I have seen kids get on and off a chair like 50 times in a row just for fun because they're learning to use those muscles, right? They find joy in those challenges. And sometimes they find it very hard and they get frustrated and they can't say anything, but you see, in their like facial expressions and everything. In the same way, we start by practicing trying to see the Lord playing hide and seek. So we do it for 2 minutes. Then we forget. Then we do it for 2 minutes again. Then we forget. We do it again. Slowly, the mind will develop the capacity to do it for longer. And eventually, it will become spontaneous. Like walking. Right now, do you need to think? How do I walk? Let me practice. Yesterday or day before, we were in a meeting and someone was on their treadmill. I could tell they were on a treadmill because of the way their head was moving. We can walk and talk and do all kinds of things, right? It's not even a thing we say, oh, I have to walk while I cook. You don't think about it. The next generation can text without looking at their phone. Can you do it? Their phone is under their table and they're texting each other, and some people still have to go, where is letter K? And then they have to press like that, right? So practice is the thing that, it's the same thing. Even leave seeing the Vibhooti of the Lord, seeing the Lord playing hide and seek with us, right? When we want to see existence everywhere, pratibodha viditam mata, right? You have to see that existence and that consciousness everywhere, first in meditation, and become established in it before it becomes spontaneous. So it is just a consistency of practice that will help with this. And Bhagavan has promised he will give us Buddhi Yoga, correct? So you find love in your heart for the Lord, you keep putting your sincere effort in, and he has to take care of the rest. He will make sure that we get that vision if we put our love and our sincerity in it. You don't need to worry about that. And remember, we're not yet at the end of Gita. Still so many chapters to come. In chapter 11, next chapter, he will say, become an instrument. Becoming an instrument means and see this world as Vishwarupa, see this world as the form of the Lord, right? So slowly, the ideas that come, as we keep reflecting on them, it becomes easier to spontaneously have this vision, I think. I hope also. Okay. Can you explain the 12th Vibhuti, the winning strategy, Niti, better? Guruji says, strategy is indeed a divine glory seen in extraordinary achievers. How to interpret it better? Okay. When anything is achieved, the principle is that some strategy or some planning was there behind it, right? You don't just win by chance, whether in sports or in battle or in a company or in an argument or whatever, right? Guruji gives the example that if you conquer your enemy, that is one part. But having conquered your enemy, to win over their heart, meaning for them to be able to identify with you and your culture and integrate and respect you and all of that, accept you as their ruler. Strategy is required. Otherwise, there's no peace, and so there's no real victory. So strategy is required in any any success requires strategy. So far, so good? Okay. Now you have to just bring that into our lives. Strategy is the divine glory seen in extraordinary achievements, is the statement. What is the greatest achievement in our life? Please don't say my kids. The greatest achievement in our life is supposed to be moksha, right? That means we need a strategy. Okay, so take your kids also. You needed a strategy to have good kids, isn't it? Those who didn't have strategies, they're learning the hard way. But strategy is what is required in every achievement, including the achievement of moksha. You have to get qualified, find a great guru, develop purity of mind, develop those qualities that will allow us to imbibe knowledge, etc. Do our actions in such a way that they will help my overall goal. So this is for that greatest achievement in our life. We need to have a strategy. Then also for ordinary achievements. If I'm not achieving something I'm trying to, is some strategy missing? And oh, let me tell, strategy is not used in a negative connotation here. It's wise planning. Sometimes when we hear the word strategy, it comes with negative connotation, but wise planning would be the sentiment that is being communicated by niti, right? And finally, if you see any achievement in life, it is because of some great planning or some great strategy that would have taken place, right? And that strategy is the Lord. So in any achievement, our mind is supposed to realize this was only possible because of strategy, some thinking and planning, not just by chance. And that strategy, that thinking, that planning is the Lord. So this is how we can reflect on that. Okay, last question. We have learned in some earlier lessons that Bhagawan is also the negativity in the world. Later in chapter 9, Bhagawan says the negativity is not me, but the power behind the negativity is me. In this light, in page 7, Bhagavan says, even though everything is his glory, all in creation is not worshipful. How to understand the deeper import of this into our living. Okay, when Guruji says that everything is his glory, but everything is not worshipful, it is from our context, meaning that everything doesn't deserve our attention for worship. With our existing impurities and limited capacities, we have opportunity costs. We have to choose the things that will help us to go from where we are to where we want to go in the simplest way possible. So our mind needs to reflect on those parts of creation that will help bring purity of mind so that we can come to see the all-pervasive reality, right? He is all things, but we won't be able to see that if we try to start using the negative things in this world. It's very hard to see the glory of the Lord and develop that vision if we start with those things, right? So he's only talking from our point of view that everything doesn't deserve our worship in our initial stages of sadhana, right? Saints worship everything and everyone, good, bad, ugly. They see the world completely different. But from our point of view, we start by seeing and worshiping the divinity in the glorious things that will help us to evolve. That's how I understand it. Okay. All right. We did it. 7:30 on the dot. Now, I want to just get everyone's attention for 2 minutes for 5 minutes for some announcements. First thing is, and I got a couple of questions from the class, Dave is doing chapter 3 next week, every morning, 6:30 to 7:30. I don't know how many people were planning to attend that. Ooh. Okay, just a couple. We'll, if there's not, I'll send a poll in the group, because if there's not many people planning to attend, which is totally fine, we will continue our class as normal, morning discussion and Friday satsang, but Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Shri Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. Hari Om.
Thank you so much, Ginaji.